Jane was invisible, an Omega forgotten by her pack, sleeping in a shack, surviving on scraps. So when she kissed the cursed statue in the Forbidden Garden, she wasn't trying to break a 1,000-year spell. She was just lonely. But the statue woke anyway, and the Alpha King inside it, he's furious, feral, and bound to her heart until the next new moon. Now Jane has 7 days to help him find the witch who cursed him, or turn back to stone forever, together. The problem? He doesn't believe in love. And she's starting to believe in nothing else. Let's begin. The Forbidden Garden of Silvermoon Pack was not forbidden because it was dangerous. It was forbidden because it was sad. That was what Jane had always thought, anyway, though she had never said it aloud. As an Omega, the lowest rank in a pack that valued strength above all else, she had learned early that her thoughts were worth less than the mud on an Alpha's boots. So she kept her observations to herself, scrubbed the floors, mended the tunics, and disappeared into the background like the ghost everyone already treated her as. But tonight, on the night of the full moon, with the pack's great hall blazing with torchlight and the sound of celebration spilling through the trees, Jane found herself walking toward the eastern edge of the territory. Not out of bravery, out of exhaustion. The loneliness had become a physical thing, a cold stone lodged behind her ribs, and she needed air that didn't smell like other people's joy. The path to the garden was overgrown, marked only by deer trails and the occasional broken fence post. Brambles caught at her threadbare shawl, and the roots of ancient oaks tried to trip her bare feet. But Jane had spent 19 years navigating a world that didn't want her. A few thorns weren't going to stop her. The archway appeared without warning, a crescent of pale stone, cracked down the middle, strangled by vines as thick as her wrists. Beyond it, the garden unfolded in ruined splendor. Statues of wolves and warriors lay toppled and moss-covered. A fountain, long dry, cradled a skeleton of autumn leaves. Roses, black and blood-red, grew wild, their thorns long as her fingers, their scent heavy and sweet like a funeral. And at the center, on a throne of twisted roots and granite, sat the largest statue of all. Jane stopped breathing. It was a man. No, a king. He sat upright, one hand resting on a stone sword laid across his lap, the other gripping the arm of the throne as if he had died in the middle of a command. His hair was carved in wild waves, frozen mid-toss by an ancient wind. His face was devastatingly sharp, high cheekbones, a straight nose that had never been broken, a mouth set in a permanent, cruel frown. Even in marble, he radiated power. His eyes were closed, long lashes casting shadows on his cheeks as if he were merely sleeping. But he wasn't sleeping. He was cursed. Every pup in Silvermoon grew up hearing the legend, whispered in the dark like a forbidden prayer. The Alpha King Jesse. He ruled 1,000 years ago when wolves were stronger and magic ran like water. He conquered 100 packs, crushed 1,000 enemies, and built an empire that stretched from the eastern sea to the western mountains. But he never took a mate. Never loved, never even tried. So a witch he had scorned, a woman whose heart he had broken without a second thought, laid a curse upon him. You shall stand as stone until a true heart wakes you with a kiss. And there he remains, in the garden that time forgot, waiting for a love he never believed in. The pack elders used the story as a warning. Love or become nothing. Open your heart or turn to stone. The young wolves whispered it as a dare, sneaking toward the garden at midnight only to run back screaming at the sound of their own footsteps. Jane had always thought it was a tragedy. Not because the king was cursed, but because he had lived an entire life without ever knowing what it felt like to be held. She stepped closer to the statue. The air grew warm around the marble, as if it retained heat from a sun that had set a millennium ago. She reached out, hesitating, then touched his hand, cold, smooth, dead. But beneath her palm, just for an instant, she could have sworn she felt a pulse. Lonely, she whispered, her voice swallowed by the silence. I know that feeling. No answer, of course no answer. He was stone, but Jane had spent 19 years talking to walls, so she talked to him. My name is Jane, I'm an Omega. That means I'm nothing, mostly. I clean and sew and fetch things. Sometimes I think I'd rather be a statue than a ghost. She laughed softly, bitterly. At least people look at statues. She traced the line of his jaw. The marble was warm now, definitely warm. They say you were cursed because you never loved anyone. I've never been loved either. Not really. Theo, he's the only one who's ever been kind to me, but he pities me. Ivy, the beta's daughter, hates me for no reason except that I exist. And the alpha, she shrugged. He doesn't know my name. None of them do. I'm just the girl who does the laundry and sleeps in the shack and never complains because complaining would mean someone would have to notice me first. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Think if I were a king, I would have loved someone, just to feel something, just to prove I could. She looked at his mouth, cold, stern, beautiful. And on a wild, desperate, lonely impulse that she would never be able to explain, she stood on her toes, wrapped her fingers around his stony shoulders, and pressed her lips to his. It was not a romantic kiss. It was clumsy and trembling and wet with tears. Her nose bumped his. Her shawl slipped off one shoulder. For a second, she felt foolish, kissing a statue in a dead garden while her pack celebrated without her. Then the world broke. Heat exploded from his mouth into hers. Not warmth, fire. It raced down her throat into her chest, and she gasped and tried to pull back, but she couldn't. Her lips were fused to his as if by glue or magic or fate. The marble cracked, not a small crack, a thunderous, earth-shaking split that ran from his crown to his feet. The sound was like a mountain shearing in half. Vines snapped. Roots tore from the soil. The statue's chest heaved once, twice, and where gray stone had been, golden skin appeared. Jane finally wrenched herself back, stumbling so hard she fell onto the dead grass. She scrambled backward on her hands, heart hammering, as the statue moved, first his fingers. They curled around the stone sword, and the sword itself crumbled to dust. Then his arms. Then his chest, rising and falling with breath so deep it stirred the fallen leaves. His head tilted back, and his lips parted, and from his throat came a sound that was not a groan or a growl, but something older. The rumble of a long-dormant volcano waking after 1,000 years of sleep. Jesse, the Alpha King, opened his eyes. They were molten gold. Not amber or honey or any soft thing, molten, like liquid metal straight from a forge. They blazed with 1,000 years of rage and confusion and something else. Hunger. His gaze found Jane immediately. Pinned her to the ground like a butterfly on a board. Who dares? His voice was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was the weight of an ocean pressing down on her chest. It was the crash of waves on a cliff, the splintering of ships, the last sound a sailor hears before drowning. He rose from the throne. Marble dust and ancient grime fell from his body in sheets. He was naked, perfectly, terrifyingly naked, every muscle carved by 1,000 battles. Scars crossed his torso like a map of wars long forgotten. His dark hair, freed from its stone prison, whipped around his face in a wind that came from nowhere. He took a step toward her. Jane couldn't move. Her body had turned to stone instead. She stared up at him, this ancient king, this legend made flesh, and waited to die. But he didn't kill her. He stopped 3 feet away, looming over her like a thundercloud, and he smelled her. His nostrils flared. His golden eyes narrowed. "An Omega," he said, and the word was an insult. "A child, a nothing." He tilted his head, and something flickered across his face, confusion, maybe, or disbelief. "You're the one who woke me," Jane found her voice. It came out as a squeak. I'm sorry, I didn't think it would work, I just thought you looked sad." Jessie stared at her like she had spoken a language that had died 1,000 years ago. "Sad," he repeated, as if tasting the word for poison. "I am an Alpha King. I have conquered nations. I have burned cities to ash. I have stood in the blood of my enemies and felt nothing." He leaned down, and his face was inches from hers. His breath was warm, impossibly warm for a man who had been stone for a millennium. "I am not sad, I am cursed. There is a difference." "Then why did the curse break?" Jane whispered. Something dangerous moved behind his eyes. He straightened slowly, looking down at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to smash open. "The witch's curse was simple," he said. "I would remain stone until a true heart woke me with a kiss." His lip curled. "So either you have a true heart, little Omega, which I find laughably unlikely, or the witch lied. And I have been standing in that garden for 1,000 years because of a lie." Jane pushed herself to her feet. Her legs were shaking, but she refused to cower. She had cowered her whole life. If she was going to die tonight, she would die standing up. "Maybe it wasn't a lie," she said. "Maybe I do have a true heart, you don't know me." Jessie laughed. It was a cold, terrible sound, the laugh of a man who had forgot how to be human. "Know everything I need to know. You're an Omega. You reek of loneliness and fear and the desperate need to be loved. You kissed a statue because you were sad and pathetic and hopping for a miracle." He stepped closer, and Jane stepped back, and her spine hit the cold stone of the fountain. "Well, here's your miracle. I'm awake. And I am not grateful." Before she could respond, footsteps crashed through the undergrowth. A figure burst through the archway, a young man with wind-tousled brown hair, panicked eyes, and a tracker's leather vest. "Jane," Theo skidded to a halt, his gaze darting from her to the naked king to the shattered remains of the throne. His face went pale as milk. "Oh, moons above, oh no, what did you do?" "I didn't mean to," Jane said quickly. "You kissed the cursed statue," Theo's voice cracked. "The one every elder has told us not to go near since we were in diapers. That statue." I felt bad for him. "He's the Alpha King, he ate people." "I did not eat people," Jessie said flatly. "I conquered them, there's a difference." Theo looked at the king, then at Jane, then back at the king. He swallowed hard. "We're going to die," he said. "We're absolutely going to die." Jesse ignored him. His golden eyes were fixed on Jane with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He was studying her now, not as a threat but as a curiosity, like she was a bug he had found in his wine. "Curse is broken," he said slowly, "but not destroyed. I can feel it faint like a thread still tied around my throat." His hand went to his neck and his jaw tightened. "The witch who cursed me is dead, but her magic lives on in her bloodline. I need to find her descendant and sever the final thread or the curse will reclaim me." "How long do you have?" Jane asked. Jesse's eyes met hers. 7 days. At the next new moon, I turn back to stone, permanently, unless I find the witch's heir and force them to undo what was done. Theo raised a trembling hand. "And what does that have to do with Jane?" Jesse smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just found his prey. "She woke me," he said. "Which means she is bound to the curse now. Her heart is the key. If I turn back to stone, she turns with me." He tilted his head. "Congratulations, little Omega. You wanted someone to notice you. You're the most important person in my world now. For the next 7 days, you don't leave my side." Jane's blood turned to ice. "But I have chores," she whispered. "I don't care. Laundry. Will rot. The Alpha will notice I'm gone. Let him." Jesse's golden eyes blazed. "I am the Alpha King. I bow to no one. And for the first time in 1,000 years, I have a reason to live." He looked at her, really looked at her, from her tangled hair to her bare feet to the tear tracks on her cheeks. "You're going to help me find the witch's heir, Jane the Omega. And then when this is over, I will forget you ever existed." He turned and walked toward the archway, his naked back a map of scars and power. Theo grabbed Jane's arm. "We need to run, now." Jane didn't move. She was staring at the place where the statue had sat for 1,000 years. The empty throne, the scattered marble dust, the roses that had turned from black to red. She had kissed a monster and woken him up. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and the confusion and the screaming voice that told her to flee, something else stirred. Something warm, something dangerous. She had spent 19 years feeling nothing. Now she felt everything. Jane took a breath. Then she lifted her chin, wrapped her tattered shawl tighter around her shoulders, and followed the king into the dark. The great hall of Silvermoon Pack had never been so silent. One moment, the room had been alive with celebration, drunken laughter, clashing cups, the thunder of dancing feet. Alpha Declan had been raising a toast to his son's new mate, his voice booming off the rafters. Ivy had been giggling into her wine, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd for her next target. Theo had been slipping through the back door, hopping. No one had noticed his absence. Then the doors had exploded inward, not opened. Exploded. The iron hinges snapped like twigs. The oak planks splintered into 1,000 pieces that rained across the feast tables like deadly confetti. Wolves screamed. Cups shattered. A dozen warriors shifted midair, claws and fangs emerging as they threw themselves between the unknown threat and their alpha. It didn't matter. Jesse walked through the wreckage like a god descending from a nightmare. He had found clothes somewhere, a black tunic that strained across his shoulders, leather pants that looked older than the pack's entire lineage, boots that left cracks in the stone floor with every step. His dark hair was still wild, still moving in a wind that didn't exist. His golden eyes swept the room with the casual disdain of a man who had seen empires rise and fall and found them all wanting. Behind him, barely visible in his shadow, came Jane. She had never been so terrified in her life. Every eye in the room was on her, not with curiosity but with horror, because she was standing next to him. The legend, the monster, the Alpha King who had been stoned for 1,000 years and was now very much awake and very much unimpressed. Theo had abandoned her at the garden's edge, muttering something about finding help. Jane was alone. She had never been more alone in her life. "Who is the alpha of this wretched pack?" Jesse's voice cut through the silence like a blade. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Every wolf in the room flinched as if he had struck them. Alpha Declan rose from his throne at the far end of the hall. He was a massive man, broad as an ox, with a gray-streaked beard and arms thick as tree trunks. He had led Silvermoon for 30 years, survived 3 wars, and never backed down from a challenge. But as he looked at Jesse, something flickered across his face that Jane had never seen before: fear. "I am Alpha Declan," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "And you are trespassing, stranger. Identify yourself before I have you torn apart." Jesse smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Jane had ever seen. "I am Jesse," he said. "Son of Aldrich, conqueror of the Eastern Reaches, breaker of the Iron Wolf clan, first king of the United Packs." He took a step forward, and the warriors in front of Declan took 2 steps back. I ruled this land when your great-great-grandfather was a pup suckling at his mother's teat. I built the laws you live by. I carved the borders you defend." His golden eyes blazed. "And I have been a statue in your garden for 1,000 years while your pack threw parties and forgot my name." Silence that followed was absolute. Even the torches seemed to burn quieter. Declan's face went pale. "That's impossible." The curse was broken tonight. Jessie's gaze flicked to Jane and the room followed. Every eye landed on her. She wanted to sink into the floor. "By her," stepped forward from the crowd. Her red hair was braided with gold threads, her dress silk and expensive. She looked at Jane like she was examining something rotten she had found under her shoe. "Jane," Ivy's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. "The laundry Omega, that's impossible. She doesn't have a true heart. She doesn't have anything." Jessie moved. One moment he was 10 feet away from Ivy. The next, his hand was around her throat and her back was against a stone pillar and her feet were dangling above the ground. He hadn't shifted. He hadn't even seemed to run. He had simply decided to be there and reality had obeyed. "Speak of her like that again," Jessie said softly, "and I will remove your tongue, then your eyes, then your hands, and I will leave you alive so you can remember what it felt like to have them." Made a choking sound. Tears streamed down her face. Declan raised a hand. "Release my Beta's daughter, now." Jessie turned his head slowly. The look he gave Declan was worse than anger. It was boredom. "Or what?" he asked. "You'll attack me, go ahead. I have killed 100 alphas. One more will not stain my conscience." He released Ivy. She collapsed to the ground, gasping and sobbing, and Theo, brave, foolish Theo, rushed forward to pull her away. "I did not come here to fight. I came here to give a command." Declan's jaw tightened. "You have no authority here. The old laws are dead. The old kings are forgotten. Silvermoon answers to me." Jessie laughed. It was cold and terrible and made the wine in the cups tremble. "Your pack marks its territory with wooden fences," he said. "Your warriors train with wooden swords. Your alpha sits on a throne of carved pine." He gestured to the hall, the rough-hewn tables, the cheap torches. The faded banners. "This is not a kingdom. This is a village of children playing dress-up. I could destroy every wolf in this room before you finish drawing your next breath, and I would do it with my bare hands and feel nothing." He turned to face the crowd. His voice rose, not to a shout, but to something worse, a resonance that vibrated in Jane's bones and her teeth in the deepest part of her soul. "I am your king," Jessie said. "I was your king 1,000 years ago, and I am your king now. The curse did not remove my crown. It merely paused my reign." He spread his arms wide. "Bo!" No one moved then. Slowly, one by one, they did. Not because they wanted to, because their bodies no longer belonged to them. Jessie's presence was a weight pressing down on every wolf in the room, ancient, absolute, undeniable. It was the pull of the moon on the tide. It was gravity. Even Declan bowed. His face was purple with rage, but his knees bent and his head lowered and his hands pressed flat against the stone floor. Jane was the only one still standing. Essie looked at her. His expression shifted just slightly, just for a moment, something that might have been curiosity or confusion or hunger. "You do not bow," he said. It was not a question. Jane swallowed. "You said my heart broke the curse. That means it's as strong as yours, so why would I bow to someone who's my equal?" The room gasped. Theo covered his eyes. Ivy, still weeping on the floor, looked like she had just witnessed the apocalypse. Jessie stared at Jane for a long, terrible moment. Then he did something that terrified her more than his anger. He smiled. A real smile. Small and sharp and deeply, deeply interested. "You have teeth," he said. "I did not expect that." "Been an Omega my whole life," Jane said. Her voice was shaking, but she didn't stop. "I've been stepped on and ignored and treated like furniture." "I'm not afraid of you, Jessie. You're just another person who thinks I'm beneath them." She lifted her chin. "And you're wrong." Silence stretched. The wolves on the floor held their breath. Jessie turned to Declan. "The Omega stays in my chambers tonight. She will eat at my table. She will walk at my side." His golden eyes swept the room one last time. "And tomorrow, we leave to find the witch's heir. Anyone who tries to stop me will learn why they used to sing songs about my mercy." He walked toward the door that led to the Alpha's private quarters. Halfway there, he stopped and looked over his shoulder. "Come, little Omega," he said. "We have much to discuss." Jane didn't move. Her legs had turned to water. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Theo appeared at her side, his face pale. Jane, you don't have to go with him. I can sneak you out the back. We can run." "Where?" Jane asked quietly. "There's nowhere in the world he won't find us." Theo had no answer. Jane took a breath. Then she walked toward the king, her bare feet silent on the cold stone, her tattered shawl trailing behind her like a flag of surrender or war. She wasn't sure which yet. Jessie's chambers, formerly Declan's chambers, were the largest in the pack house. A 4-poster bed big enough for 6 wolves dominated one wall. A fireplace large enough to roast a boar crackled with fresh flames. Weapons hung on every surface, swords, axes, daggers, spears, things Jane didn't have names for. The room smelled of old leather and older blood. Jesse stood at the window, his back to her, staring out at the moonlit forest. He had poured himself a glass of wine from a decanter he had found somewhere. He didn't offer her any. "You are afraid," he said without turning around. Jane said. Lying seemed pointless. "Good, fear is useful, it keeps you alive." He turned. The firelight caught his face, highlighting the sharp planes and the shadows beneath his eyes. In the warmth of the flames, he looked almost human, almost. "But you are also brave. That is less useful. Bravery gets people killed. You said my heart broke the curse." "I did. So I'm not useless to you." Jesse set down his wine glass. He walked toward her slowly, each step deliberate, each step bringing his heat and his scent and his overwhelming presence closer. Jane held her ground. Barely. "You are not useless," he agreed. "You are the key. Without you, the curse will reclaim me. With you, I have a chance to sever it forever." He stopped a foot away from her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the faint lines at the corners that spoke of 1,000 years of frozen rage. "But do not mistake necessity for value. You are a tool, Jane, a means to an end. When this is over, I will put you down and walk away." Jane's heart cracked, just a little. Just along a fault line she hadn't known existed, but she didn't cry. She had spent 19 years crying. Tonight she was done. "Fine," she said. "Then let's find this witch's heir and get this over with, but while we're together, you treat me like a person, not a servant, not a ghost, a person." She met his golden eyes. "I've spent my whole life being invisible. I won't spend the next 7 days being your shadow." Jesse's lips curved. That small, sharp smile again. "You drive a hard bargain for an Omega." "I'm not just an Omega," Jane said. "I'm the one who woke you. That makes me whatever I want to be." A long moment they stood there, the ancient king and the laundry girl, staring at each other across a distance that had nothing to do with space. Then Jesse inclined his head. "Just a fraction, just enough." "Agreed," he said. "Now sleep. Tomorrow we ride at dawn." He turned and walked to the bed. He didn't look at her again. Jane stood in the middle of the room, alone in the presence of a monster, and wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the only right decision she had ever made. She curled up on a fur rug by the fireplace, wrapped her shawl around herself, and closed her eyes. Outside, the moon began its slow descent toward dawn, and somewhere in the forest, watching the pack house with eyes that glowed green in the dark, a figure smiled. The witch's heir had found them first. Jane woke to sunlight streaming through a window she had never seen from this angle. For a confused, blissful moment, she forgot where she was. The fur beneath her was soft. The fire had died to warm embers. Something smelled like pine and smoke and old parchment. Then she turned her head and saw Jesse sitting in a chair across the room, watching her. He was fully dressed in black leather and dark wool, a long cloak pinned at his shoulder with a brooch that looked older than the mountains. His hair was pulled back from his face, revealing the sharp lines of his jaw and the hard set of his mouth. In his hand, he held a dagger, not threatening, just turning it over and over, the blade catching the light. He had been watching her sleep. Jane sat up so fast her head spun. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough," Jesse said. His voice was neutral, but something flickered across his face there and gone too fast to name. "You talk in your sleep." Jane's face burned. "I do not." "You said, 'Please don't put me in the laundry room again.'" He tilted his head. "Who put you in the laundry room?" Jane looked away. "It doesn't matter." "Matters to me." "Why?" Jesse was silent for a moment. Then he stood, sheathed the dagger at his belt, and walked toward the window. "Because I need to understand what kind of heart broke a 1,000-year curse. Was it a heart full of love or a heart full of desperation? There is a difference, and that difference could kill us both before this is over." Jane pulled her shawl tighter. The morning light made everything look softer, kinder. Even Jesse, with his scars and his golden eyes and his 1,000 years of rage, looked almost approachable. Almost. "It was both," she said quietly. "I was desperate for someone to see me, and I loved the idea of him, the statue, I mean, not you, him, the lonely king in the garden who just needed someone to care." Jesse turned. His expression was unreadable. "And now that you have me, the real me," Jane stood up. Her legs were stiff from sleeping on the floor, but she refused to show weakness. "Now I'm not sure what I have. You're cold, you're cruel, you threatened to cut out Ivy's tongue." She met his eyes. "But you didn't, you let her go. Because you looked at me like I was a monster." "You are a monster." Jesse's lips twitched. It wasn't quite a smile. "Yes, but I am your monster now, for 7 days." He walked to the door and held it open. "Come. We have a long ride ahead, and your alpha wants words with me before we go. He has been packing outside this door for the past hour, too afraid to knock." Jane blinked. "Declan, afraid? Everyone is afraid of something." Jesse's golden eyes met hers. Even kings. The pack gathered in the courtyard, a sea of wary faces and whispered rumors. Word had spread overnight. The statue had awakened. The Omega had kissed him, and the ancient king had claimed the pack house as his own. Some wolves looked at Jane with something like awe. Most looked at her with suspicion. A few, Ivy among them, looked at her like they wanted to tear her throat out. Theo pushed through the crowd and grabbed Jane's arm. "You're alive, thank the moons, I thought he would." He stopped, glancing at Jessie, who stood a few feet away speaking with Declan in low, tense tones. "I thought he would hurt you." "Didn't," Jane said. "He just watched me sleep." Theo's face went pale. "That's worse, that's so much worse." "Me about it." Declan's voice rose, cutting through the murmurs. "You cannot simply take one of my pack members and ride off into unknown territory. She is an Omega, yes, but she is mine. Silvermoon protects its own." Jessia's response was quiet, but everyone heard it. "You protected her so well that she slept in a shack and did your laundry while your daughter called her nothing." His golden eyes swept the crowd. "Where was her protection then, Alpha? Where was her place at your table, her name in your mouth?" Declan's face reddened. That is pack business, internal matters. Then internal matters have led to external consequences." Jessie turned to face the crowd. "I am taking the Omega, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, as my bound companion until the curse is broken." He looked at Jane. "She goes where I go. She eats what I eat. She is protected by my name and my sword and my wrath." His voice dropped to a near whisper, but it carried like thunder. "Anyone who has a problem with that can raise their hand now and lose it." No one moved. Ivy stepped forward. Her neck was bruised where Jessie had grabbed her, purple fingerprints blooming against her pale skin. Her green eyes were wet with tears, but not sad tears. Rage tears. "This is wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "She's an Omega, she's nothing." "She doesn't deserve." "She broke a curse that has stood for 1,000 years, Jessie interrupted. "What have you broken, girl? What have you built? What have you sacrificed?" He took a step toward her and Ivy flinched. "You are nothing compared to her, remember that." Theo grabbed Jane's hand and squeezed. Jane squeezed back. They left within the hour. Jessie had somehow acquired horses, 2 massive black stallions that snorted steam and stamped their hooves like they were eager for war. Jane had never ridden a horse in her life. She had walked everywhere barefoot, carrying baskets of laundry or buckets of water or trays of food for wolves who wouldn't even meet her eyes. Jessie lifted her onto the larger stallion without asking permission. His hands were rough on her waist, but they didn't linger. He swung up behind her, his chest pressed against her back, his arms bracketing hers on the reins. "Hold on," he said. "To what?" "Me." The horse surged forward, and Jane grabbed Jessie's arms and held on for dear life. The forest blurred past. Jessie rode like a man who had been born on horseback, which Jane realized with a start he probably had been. 1,000 years ago, before roads and borders and packs that had forgotten his name. He guided the stallion with his knees, barely touching the reins, his body moving with the animal's rhythm like they were one creature. Jane had never been so close to anyone in her life. She could feel his heartbeat through his chest. She could smell him, smoke and pine and something ancient, something that made her wolf want to curl up and whine. She hated how safe she felt. She hated how right it felt to be held. "We're heading west," Jessie said after an hour of hard riding. His breath stirred her hair. "The witch who cursed me was named Morwen. She was the last of a long line of spellcasters who lived in the shadow of the Black Mountains. Her power came from blood, her mother's blood, her mother's mother's blood, a matriarchal line that stretched back centuries." "Her heir?" Jane asked. "Morwen had no children, or so I thought." Jessie's arms tightened around her. "But a curse like this doesn't survive 1,000 years without a keeper. Someone has been maintaining it, feeding it, making sure I stayed stone." His voice dropped. "Someone wants me frozen forever, and that someone is still out there." Jane shivered. "How do we find them?" "The curse leaves a trail. Magic has a scent faint but recognizable. I could smell it even in stone. It comes from the west." He paused. "And it's getting stronger." They rode until the sun was high, then stopped at a stream to rest the horses. Jane slid off the stallion with legs that felt like jelly. She collapsed onto a mossy rock and dipped her hands into the cold water, splashing her face. Jessie stood at the water's edge, scanning the tree line. His hand rested on the dagger at his belt. He hadn't relaxed once since they left. "You don't trust this forest," Jane said. "I don't trust anything that lives." He glanced at her. "Except horses. Horses are honest." "Me," Jessie was quiet for a long moment. "You are a mystery. I do not trust mysteries." Jane wrung out her shawl and draped it over a branch to dry. "My mother abandoned me on the pack's doorstep when I was a day old. She left a note that said I was nothing." The pack believed her. "I've spent 19 years proving them wrong." She looked at Jessie. "That's not a mystery, that's just sad." Jesse's expression didn't change, but something softened in his eyes just a fraction. Sadness is not weakness. I know, Jane stood up. It's fuel. They ate in silence, dried meat and hard bread that Jesse produced from a saddlebag. Jane had never tasted anything so good. She was used to scraps and leftovers, the crusts of bread and the gristle of meat that no one else wanted. This was real food, and she ate every crumb. Jesse watched her. When was your last meal? I ate yesterday. What did you eat? Jane hesitated. The crust of Ivy's bread. She threw it on the floor. Something dark passed over Jesse's face. They starved you. They didn't notice me enough to starve me. I just got what was left. Jane shrugged. It's fine. I'm used to it. It's not fine. Jesse's voice was hard. You broke a curse that 1,000 years of wolves couldn't touch. You have power in you, power you don't understand, and they treated you like a stray dog. He stood abruptly, turning away from her. It makes me angry. Why? Because I was a stray dog once, before I became king, before I conquered and killed and built an empire on the bones of my enemies. His back was rigid. I remember what it felt like to be nothing, and I hate that you know the feeling. Jane didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. They rode again. The forest thickened, the trees growing taller and closer together, their branches weaving a canopy that blocked out the sun. The air grew cool and damp, heavy with the smell of moss and decay. Jesse's hand never left his dagger. The witch's scent is stronger here, he said. She's been this way recently, within the past week. How can you tell? Magic leaves residue, like sweat on skin. I can taste it. He grimaced. Bitter. Like burned sugar and blood. Jane shivered. Do you think she knows we're coming? Jesse's arms tightened around her. I hope so. I want her to be afraid. They rode until dusk, until the horses were lathered and the light had turned gold and red through the trees. Jesse finally stopped at the edge of a clearing, a small meadow ringed with white birches, a stream running through the center. A fire pit, still warm, sat in the middle. Someone had been here recently. Jesse dismounted in one smooth motion, then lifted Jane down. His hands lingered on her waist for a moment longer than necessary. He didn't seem to notice. Jane did. Someone is watching us, Jesse said quietly. His golden eyes scanned the tree line. Don't react, don't look, just stay close to me. Jane's heart pounded. Is it the witch? I don't know, but whoever it is, they're not afraid. He pulled Jane closer until she was pressed against his chest. His heartbeat was steady, calm, even like a drum counting down to war. Stay behind me. No matter what happens, do not move. The forest went silent. No birds, no insects, just the soft whisper of wind through the birches and the gurgle of the stream. Then a figure stepped out of the trees. She was young, younger than Jane, maybe 17, with pale white hair that fell past her waist and eyes that glowed green in the fading light. She wore a dress of black silk that seemed to drink the sunset. Her feet were bare, but she didn't seem to feel the cold ground. She smiled. It was a beautiful smile. It was also terrifying. Hello, Uncle, she said. It's been 1,000 years. You look terrible. Jesse went rigid. His hand flew to his dagger. Who are you? He demanded. The girl tilted her head. Her green eyes sparkled with something that might have been amusement or might have been madness. Morwen's granddaughter. The last of the bloodline. She curtsied, her white hair pooling on the grass. My name is Ivy, and I've been waiting for you. Jane's blood turned to ice. She whispered. But Ivy is back at Silvermoon. Ivy is, the girl laughed. It was a high, sweet sound like bells ringing in a storm. Oh, the real Ivy is still there, bruised and crying and very, very confused. She winked. I've been wearing her face for 3 years. It's amazing what you can do with a little glamour and a lot of spite. Her green eyes fixed on Jesse. You killed my grandmother, Uncle. You burned her alive for cursing you, but curses don't die. They just wait for the right moment to wake up. Jesse drew his dagger. I am not your uncle, but you were her lover once, before you broke her heart and called her a monster. The girl's smile faded. She loved you, and you destroyed her, so she destroyed you. Fair trade, don't you think? Jane's mind was racing. 3 years. The false Ivy had been in Silvermoon for 3 years, watching, waiting, making sure the curse held. Making sure no one kissed the statue, but someone had. Jane, why now? Jane asked, her voice shaking. Why did you let me break the curse? The girl's green eyes slid to her. For a moment, something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or respect. Because I couldn't stop you, she admitted. The curse was weakening. 1,000 years is a long time, even for magic. Another decade, and it would have broken on its own. She shrugged. So I let it happen, let him wake up, let him think he has a chance. Her smile returned, sharper this time. Because now I get to watch him lose everything again, including you. Girl raised her hand. Green fire flickered between her fingers. Jessie stepped in front of Jane, dagger raised. You will not touch her. Then come and stop me, Uncle. The girl's green eyes blazed. Let's see if 1,000 years of stone has made you soft. The forest exploded into chaos. The green fire came not as a ball or a bolt, but as a wave, a living, breathing tide of emerald flame that rolled across the meadow, devouring grass and stone and air itself. It moved like water, like smoke, like something that had been hungry for 1,000 years and had finally found its prey. Jesse didn't flinch. He threw his dagger, not at the girl, but at the ground between them. The blade struck the earth and sent out a shockwave of silver light that collided with the green fire and stopped it cold. The two forces hissed and snarled against each other, sparks flying, the air filling with the smell of ozone and old blood. The false Ivy laughed. Still using the old tricks. Grandmother taught me how to break those before I could walk. Then she taught you poorly. Jesse's voice was calm, almost bored. He reached down and pulled a second dagger from his boot. Jane hadn't even seen that one. You're pushing instead of pulling. Fire is not a wave, it's a breath, and you are holding yours. Girl's smile faltered, just for a second. Jessie threw the second dagger. It flew straight and true, aimed not at her heart but at the space just to her left, and when it passed through the air where she should have been, she wasn't there. She had vanished, reappearing 10 feet to the right, her white hair whipping around her face. You missed, she said. Jessie's lips curved. The girl looked down. The second dagger had embedded itself in the shadow of her own feet, and the shadow was bleeding. Black ichor seeped from the wound in the earth, and the girl gasped, stumbling backward. Her glamour flickered. For just a moment, Jane saw what was underneath: pale, cracked skin, eyes that were hollow and ancient, a mouth full of too many teeth. Not Morwen's granddaughter, Jessie said quietly. You're Morwen herself, wearing a child's face, hiding in a girl's body. He took a step forward. How many hosts have you burned through in 1,000 years? The false Ivy, Morwen hissed. Her glamour snapped back into place, but the damage was done. Jane had seen the truth. You think you're clever, Morwen spat. You always thought you were clever, but cleverness didn't save your kingdom, did it? Cleverness didn't keep your pack from crumbling to dust while you stood frozen in that garden. Her green eyes blazed. I have waited 1,000 years for this moment. I have worn 100 faces. I have drunk the life from 100 bodies. And I will drink yours too, Jesse, every drop. Jesse tilted his head. You can try. He moved. Jane had seen wolves fight before. She had seen sparring matches in the pack courtyard, watched alphas trade blows that cracked stone and bent steel. But she had never seen anything like this. Jesse didn't fight like a wolf. He fought like a force of nature, like a wildfire, like an avalanche, like something that had been born in the dark ages when combat was not a sport but a survival mechanism. He crossed the distance between them in less than a heartbeat. His fist connected with Morwen's chest, and she flew backward, slamming into a birch tree so hard the trunk split. She screamed, not in pain, but in rage, and green fire erupted from her palms, wrapping around Jesse's arms, his chest, his throat. He didn't stop. He grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the ground. The fire licked at his skin, leaving black marks, but he didn't flinch. His golden eyes burned brighter than any flame. You cursed me, he said. You took 1,000 years from me. You turned me into a story that children tell to scare each other. His grip tightened. And now you hide in a child's body and call yourself clever. Morwen laughed. It was a wet, choking sound. Kill me and the curse becomes permanent, you know that. The magic is tied to my bloodline. If I die, the curse dies with me, but not before it turns you back to stone. You'll have seconds, maybe minutes, before the marble claims you again. Her green eyes flicked to Jane. And she'll turn with you. 2 statues in a garden, how romantic. Jane's blood ran cold. She's lying. She's not, Jesse said quietly. His grip loosened slightly. The curse is a chain, she is the lock. If she dies, the chain snaps, but the backlash will turn me to stone before it does. I'll be frozen forever, and anyone bound to the curse will freeze with me. He looked at Jane. You kissed me, you're bound. Morwen smiled. So you see your predicament, uncle. You cannot kill me, and you cannot let me go because I will simply wait until the new moon and finish what I started. She tilted her head. But I can offer you a deal. Jesse's jaw tightened. I don't make deals with witches. You made one 1,000 years ago. You promised to love her. You broke that promise. Morwen's voice softened, and for a moment the hatred in her eyes flickered into something almost human. I loved you, Jesse. I loved you more than magic, more than power, more than my own life. And you threw me away like I was nothing. Jesse was silent for a long moment. Then he released her. Morwen fell to the ground, gasping, rubbing her throat. She looked up at him with those ancient, hollow eyes. I didn't throw you away, Jesse said. I couldn't love you. There's a difference. Don't know. He stepped back. But I know that killing you won't bring back the years I lost. And I know that holding on to this anger has turned you into something your grandmother would weep to see. He looked down at her. You were kind once, Morwen, before the power ate you alive. Morwen's face twisted. Don't you dare. Leave, Jesse said. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Find a new host. Spin your webs. I don't care. But if you come near the Omega again, I will find a way to end you that doesn't trigger the curse. I will spend the rest of my existence figuring it out if I have to." His golden eyes blazed. "And I have all the time in the world." Morwen stared at him. Then she laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "You haven't changed," she said. "You still think you can win everything, but you're wrong, Jesse. You've already lost. You just don't know it yet." Her green eyes slid to Jane. "She's going to break your heart. The same way you broke mine. And when she does, I'll be there. Waiting." She raised her hand. Green fire engulfed her body, not burning, but consuming. She dissolved into smoke and ash and shadow, and then she was gone. The meadow was silent. The stream gurgled. The birches swayed. Jane realized she was shaking. Jesse stood motionless for a long time, staring at the spot where Morwen had vanished. His hands were curled into fists at his sides. The black marks on his arms from the green fire were already fatting, healing at a speed that shouldn't have been possible. Jane wanted to say something. She wanted to ask if he was okay, if the curse was still holding, if Morwen would really come back. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she walked to him slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. She stopped at his side and looked up at his face. His expression was unreadable, stone, almost like he had been for 1,000 years. "You loved her," Jane said quietly. It wasn't a question. Jesse's jaw tightened. "I thought I did, a long time ago, before I knew what love was supposed to feel like." He finally looked at Jane, and his golden eyes were tired, ancient and tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. "She was beautiful, powerful. She made me feel like I was more than a king. She made me feel like I was human. What happened?" "I happened." Jesse turned away. "I was young and stupid and afraid. I pushed her away because I didn't know how to let anyone in, and by the time I realized what I had lost, she had already cursed me." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Poetic, isn't it? The man who couldn't love, cursed to never find love. The witch made sure I would spend eternity alone." Jane reached out and touched his arm. He flinched, actually flinched, like her touch burned him. "Don't," he said. "Why not?" "Because I don't deserve comfort. I don't deserve kindness. I'm not a good man, Jane. I've done terrible things, things that would make you run screaming if you knew the half of them." He pulled away from her hand. "Morwen was right about one thing. I haven't changed. I'm still the same cold, broken creature who couldn't love her 1,000 years ago." Jane didn't move. She stood her ground, her hand still outstretched, her heart pounding. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe you've just been frozen for so long that you forgot what warmth feels like." Jesse stared at her. For a long, terrible moment, she thought he would push her away again. Then something cracked in his expression, a hairline fracture in the wall he had built around himself. He didn't speak. He didn't touch her, but he didn't leave. They stood together in the meadow as the last light faded and the stars came out, one by one, like distant fires. They made camp in a cave Jesse found a half-mile from the meadow. It was small and dry and smelled of old earth and older bones. Jesse built a fire with flint and steel. No magic, Jane noticed. He was careful about that now. They sat on opposite sides of the flames, the smoke curling between them like a curtain. Jane tore strips of dried meat with her teeth and chewed slowly, her mind racing. Morwen was still out there. The curse was still ticking. 7 days had become 6, then 5, then 4. Every hour brought them closer to the new moon, closer to stone. "We need a new plan," Jane said. "We can't kill Morwen, we can't let her go. What's left?" Jesse poked the fire with a stick. "We find a way to sever the curse without killing her. It's possible, difficult but possible." "How?" "There's a ritual, old magic, older than Morwen. It requires 3 things: the blood of the one who cast the curse, the blood of the one who broke it, and a vessel to hold the magic while it's transferred." He looked at Jane. "You're the one who broke it, I'm the one who carries it. Morwen is the one who cast it. We need her blood, willingly given." Jane stared at him. "You think she'll just hand it over?" "No, I think we'll have to take it." Jesse's golden eyes were hard. "And I think it will cost us more than we want to pay." Fire crackled. An owl called somewhere in the darkness. Jane thought about Ivy, the real Ivy, back at Silvermoon, waking up with bruises on her neck and no memory of the past 3 years. She thought about Theo, probably packing the pack house, sick with worry. She thought about the false Ivy's smile, sharp and cruel and ancient. Then she thought about Jesse's face when he said, "I don't deserve kindness." "Wrong, you know," Jane said. "About not changing." Jesse raised an eyebrow. "Am I?" "You let her go. Morwen, you could have killed her. You could have taken the risk, turned to stone, taken me with you, but you didn't." Jane met his eyes across the fire. 1,000 years ago, you would have killed her without a second thought and damn the consequences." Jesse was silent for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, 1,000 years ago, I didn't have anything to lose." Jane's heart skipped a beat. "And now?" He didn't answer. He just looked at her like she was the fire, like she was the stars, like she was something he had been searching for without knowing it. Then he looked away. Sleep, he said. Tomorrow we ride north. There's a witch in the mountains who owes me a favor. She might know how to perform the ritual. Jane wanted to push. She wanted to make him say what he was thinking, but she was tired, bone-tired, soul-tired, and the fire was warm and the cave was safe. She curled up on the hard ground and closed her eyes. She dreamed of green fire and golden eyes and a hand reaching for hers in the dark. When she woke, Jesse was sitting exactly where he had been, watching her sleep. He didn't look away this time. The journey north took 3 days. 3 days of hard riding, cold food, and silence that grew heavier with every passing mile. Jesse spoke only when necessary, to warn of a rocky path, to point out a safe place to camp, to tell Jane to eat even when she wasn't hungry. He didn't mention Morwen. He didn't mention the curse. He didn't mention the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. But Jane noticed. She noticed everything now. The way his hand brushed her waist when he lifted her onto the horse. The way his voice softened when he said her name. The way he stood guard every night, never sleeping, his golden eyes fixed on the darkness like he was waiting for the world to attack. On the 3rd night, as they made camp in the shadow of the Black Mountains, Jane finally asked the question that had been burning in her chest. "Why do you watch me sleep?" Jesse was sharpening his dagger with a whetstone. The scrape of metal on metal filled the small cave they had found. He didn't look up. "Because you talk," he said, "and because I need to know if the curse is affecting you." "That's not why." Scraping stopped. Jesse's hands went still. Slowly, he raised his head and his golden eyes met hers across the fire. For a moment, he looked almost vulnerable, almost human. "No," he said quietly. "That's not why." Jane waited. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the mountains, a wolf howled, a real wolf, not a shifter, its cry lonely and wild. "You remind me of something I lost," Jesse finally said. "Something I didn't know I wanted back." He set down the dagger and stared into the flames. "When I was young, before I was king, before I was anything, I used to dream of a life that was simple. A mate, a home, children who laughed instead of schemed. I buried that dream so deep I forgot it existed." His jaw tightened. "And then you kissed me, and now I can't stop dreaming about it." Jane's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What do you dream about?" Jesse looked at her. The firelight danced in his golden eyes, turning them to liquid amber. "You," he said. "Your voice. Your hands. The way you looked at me in the garden, not with fear, not with awe, but with kindness, like I was worth saving." He laughed, a soft, broken sound. "No one has looked at me like that in 1,000 years, not even Morwen, especially not Morwen." Jane moved without thinking. She rose from her side of the fire and walked around the flames, her bare feet silent on the cold stone. She stopped in front of him, close enough to touch. "You are worth saving," she said. "You just don't believe it." Jesse's breath caught. His hand rose, trembling slightly, and hovered near her face, not touching, just there, like he was afraid she would disappear if he made contact. "I have done terrible things," he whispered. "Worse than you can imagine. I have killed innocents. I have burned villages. I have broken hearts and called it strategy." His hand finally cupped her cheek, and his touch was impossibly gentle for someone so strong. "If you knew everything, you would hate me." "Maybe," Jane said. "Or maybe I would understand." She leaned into his touch. His palm was warm, so warm like the marble had been on that first night, but this was different. This was alive. Jesse's thumb traced her cheekbone. His golden eyes searched her face, looking for something, deception, maybe, or pity. He found neither. "Not afraid of me," he said. "No," Jane agreed. "I'm afraid of losing you." Something shattered behind Jesse's eyes. The wall he had built over 1,000 years. The coldness, the cruelty, the armor he wore like a second skin cracked. Just a little, just enough. He pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a declaration. It was just a hold, fierce and desperate and aching. Jane wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her face into his shoulder and breathed him in. Smoke and pine and something ancient. Something that felt like home. "I don't know how to do this," Jesse murmured into her hair. "I don't know how to be soft. I don't know how to care without destroying." "Then learn," Jane whispered. "I'll teach you." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the fire burning low. The world outside the cave could wait. The curse could wait. Morwen could wait. For one night, they were just 2 broken people holding each other in the dark. And for one night, that was enough. They reached the witch's cottage at dawn on the 4th day. It was built into the side of the mountain itself. A crooked door of black oak, windows that glowed with pale blue light, a roof made of living moss that seemed to breathe. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, smelling of herbs and honey and something metallic. Jesse dismounted first, then helped Jane down. His hands lingered on her waist for a moment longer than necessary. Neither of them mentioned it. "Her name is Flora," Jesse said. "She's older than me, even. She was Morwen's teacher before Morwen turned to darkness. If anyone knows how to break this curse without killing anyone, it's her." Jane looked at the crooked door. Does she know we're coming? She knows everything. Jessie knocked, 3 sharp raps, then 2 soft ones, a pattern, a password. She just pretends she doesn't. Door opened. The woman who stood in the doorway was not what Jane expected. She was young, younger than Jessie, younger than Morwen's false face, with copper skin and silver hair braided with feathers and bones. Her eyes were the color of thunderclouds, and they held a weight that had nothing to do with her apparent age. Jessie, Flora said. Her voice was warm but cautious, like a grandmother greeting a wayward son. You look better than the last time I saw you, which was, 1,000 years ago. You were covered in marble dust and screaming at the moon. I don't scream, Jessie said. You screamed. Flora's gaze shifted to Jane, and her expression softened. And you must be the one who kissed him, the Omega with the true heart. She stepped aside and gestured into the cottage. Come in, both of you. We have much to discuss and very little time. Cottage was larger inside than it appeared from outside, a common trick with witches, Jane realized. Shelves lined every wall, stuffed with jars and books and dried herbs and things Jane couldn't name. A cauldron bubbled over a hearth fire. A black cat slept on a pile of cushions. The air was thick with magic, heavy and sweet and slightly dizzying. Flora motioned for them to sit at a wooden table carved with runes. She poured 3 cups of tea, steaming and dark and smelling of cinnamon, and sat across from them, her thundercloud eyes fixed on Jane. You broke a 1,000-year curse with a kiss, Flora said. Do you understand how remarkable that is? Jane shook her head. I just felt bad for him. He looked lonely. Flora laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised. Lonely. She kissed the Alpha King because he looked lonely. She looked at Jessie. I like her, don't ruin this. Jessie's jaw tightened. We're not here for commentary, we're here for a solution. Morwen is alive. She's been wearing faces, burning through hosts. She attacked us 3 days ago. Flora's smile faded. I know, I felt the ripple in the magic. She set down her cup and folded her hands on the table. The ritual you're thinking of, blood of the caster, blood of the breaker, a vessel to hold the magic, it's possible, but it's dangerous. If even one thing goes wrong, the curse doesn't break, it splinters, and splintered curses are worse than whole ones. What does that mean? Jane asked. Flora's thundercloud eyes met hers. It means you could end up trapped in the space between life and stone, conscious but frozen, aware but unable to move, for eternity. She looked at Jessie. Both of you. Silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stone. Jessie reached under the table and found Jane's hand. He didn't look at her. He didn't say anything. He just held on. How do we do it? Jane asked. Flora studied her for a long moment. You're serious about this. You're willing to risk eternal damnation for a king who doesn't know how to love. Jane squeezed Jessie's hand. He's learning. Flora's expression softened. So he is. She stood and walked to a shelf, pulling down a leather-bound book so old the pages were crumbling at the edges. The ritual requires 3 things. Morwen's blood, freely given or forcibly taken, your blood, Jane, offered without coercion, and a vessel. The vessel must be something that holds meaning for both of you, something tied to your hearts. Jessie frowned. A physical object, an emotional one, a memory made manifest. Flora opened the book and flipped through the pages. A gift, a letter, a lock of hair. Something that represents the bond between you. She looked up. Do you have anything like that? Jane and Jessie looked at each other. They had known each other for 4 days. 4 days of riding and fighting and holding each other in the dark. 4 days of silence and secrets and slow, painful trust. They had nothing. No, Jessie said quietly. We don't. Flora closed the book. Then you need to make something before the new moon, before Morwen finds you again. She looked at Jane. You have 2 days. They left the cottage with full packs and empty hearts. Flora had given them food, water, and a small glass vial meant to hold Morwen's blood. She had also given them a warning. Morwen knows you're coming. She's been tracking you since the meadow. She won't let you take her blood without a fight, and she won't fight fair. Jane rode in front of Jessie, his arms around her, his chest pressed against her back. The mountains loomed around them, dark and ancient and full of shadows. What do we do? Jane asked. We don't have a vessel, we don't have her blood, we don't have anything. Have each other, Jessie said. His voice was rough. That's more than I've had in 1,000 years. Jane leaned back against him. For a moment she let herself pretend that this was normal, that they were just 2 people riding through the mountains, no curse, no witch, no ticking clock, but the sun was setting. The new moon was coming, and somewhere in the shadows, Morwen was watching. We need to find her, Jane said, before she finds us. Jessie's arms tightened. Agreed, but we need bait. Jane turned her head to look at him. What kind of bait? Jessie's golden eyes were hard. The kind she can't resist, me. He looked down at her. She wants me to suffer. She wants to watch me lose everything, so we give her what she wants. We let her think she's winning. Jane's heart pounded. That's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. Jessie's hand came up to cup her face, gentle and fierce at the same time. But I won't let her hurt you. I swear it on my crown, on my name, on the stone I crawled out of. She will not touch you. Jane covered his hand with hers. Then let's go catch a witch. Jessie smiled, a real smile, small and sharp and full of something that looked like hope. They rode into the gathering dark. The new moon hung invisible in the sky, but Jane could feel it, a pressure behind her eyes, a weight in her chest, a cold whisper at the back of her mind that said time is running out. The curse knew. It was pulling at Jessie, tugging at the edges of his skin, trying to turn him back to stone. She could see it in the way he moved, slower now, stiffer, like his joints were grinding against invisible marble. They had one night left. Maybe less. They made camp in a clearing at the base of the Black Mountains, exactly where Flora had told them Morwen would come. A ring of white stones marked the spot. Old magic, Flora had said, a trap that would hold the witch long enough for them to take her blood. Jane didn't like traps. She didn't like the way Jessie's hands trembled when he thought she wasn't looking. She didn't like the way the air smelled like burned sugar and blood, the same way it had in the meadow. But there was no other choice. Jessie built a fire, slowly, painfully, his fingers fumbling with the flint and steel. Jane watched him, her heart aching. He was fatting. The curse was reclaiming him inch by inch, and there was nothing she could do except wait for Morwen and hope the ritual worked. You should rest, Jane said. Save your strength. Jessie shook his head. If I rest, I might not get up again. He sat on a fallen log, his golden eyes duller than they had been that morning. The marble is spreading, I can feel it in my lungs. Jane crossed the clearing and sat beside him. She took his hand, cold now, colder than it should have been, and held it between both of hers. Then we do it tonight, she said. We don't wait for her to come to us, we call her here. Jessie looked at her. That's dangerous, she'll be ready for us. She's always ready, that's not going to change. Jane squeezed his hand. But she's also arrogant, she thinks she's already won, we can use that. Jessie was silent for a long moment, then he nodded. Stay behind me, he said, no matter what happens. Jane, I said no. Jane stood up, pulling him to his feet. I'm not hiding behind you anymore, I broke the curse once. I can break it again, but I can't do that if I'm cowering in the shadows while you fight my battles. Jessie's jaw tightened. You're an Omega, you have no training, no weapons, no. I have a heart that woke a king, Jane interrupted. That's more than any weapon you've ever carried. Moment, Jessie looked like he wanted to argue. Then something shifted in his expression, pride, maybe, or wonder, and he pulled her into his arms. You are the most infuriating creature I have ever met, he murmured into her hair. I know. I am terrified of losing you. Won't. How do you know? Jane pulled back and looked up at him. The firelight danced across his sharp features, softening the hard lines, making him look almost young. Because I'm not going anywhere, she said. And neither are you. Jessie kissed her. It was not the clumsy, tearful kiss of the garden. It was not the desperate hold of the cave. It was something else entirely, something sure and steady and deep. His hands cupped her face like she was precious. His lips moved against hers like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. That, Jessie said, his voice rough, was not part of the plan. Jane smiled. It should have been. Fire crackled. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of burned sugar. And then Morwen stepped out of the shadows. She wasn't wearing Ivy's face anymore. She wasn't wearing any face at all. The creature that emerged from the darkness was ancient and terrible, skin like cracked parchment, eyes like green flames, a mouth full of too many teeth. Her white hair hung in tangled ropes to her waist. Her hands were claws. Lovely, Morwen said, her voice scraping like stones on glass. A love scene. How touching. She tilted her head and her neck cracked audibly. You know, Jessie, I waited 1,000 years for you to look at someone the way you just looked at her. And now that you finally have, I get to watch it burn. Jessie stepped in front of Jane, his body a shield. You don't have to do this, Morwen. The curse is dying. Let it go. The curse is mine. Morwen's green eyes blazed. I made it. I fed it. I kept it alive while you stood frozen and the world forgot your name. And I will not let some soft-hearted Omega steal it from me. She didn't steal it, Jessie said. She broke it with kindness, with something you never understood. Morwen laughed, a horrible, broken sound. Kindness, is that what you call it? I called it weakness. I still do. She raised her hand and green fire flickered between her claws. But fine, let's end this. You want my blood, come and take it. Fire exploded outward. Jessie moved faster than Jane had ever seen him move, despite the curse slowing his bones. He grabbed a branch from the fire and swung it like a sword, deflecting the first wave of green flame. The second wave caught him in the shoulder and he grunted, stumbling backward. Jessie, Jane screamed. Stay back. He threw the burning branch at Morwen. It passed through her like smoke. She was already somewhere else behind him, her claws reaching for his throat. Jessie spun, dagger in hand, and slashed across her arm. Black blood sprayed the ground. Morwen shrieked. The circle of white stones flared to life. Flora's trap activated with a sound like a thunderclap. A dome of silver light exploded from the stones, encasing Morwen in a cage of pure magic. She slammed against the walls, screaming, clawing, her green fire splashing harmlessly against the barrier. "Now," Jessie shouted. "The vial!" Jane's hands were shaking as she pulled the glass vial from her pocket. She ran to the edge of the cage, where Morwen's black blood was dripping through the cracks in the stones. She held out the vial, trying to catch the drops. Morwen's hand shot through the barrier. The magic should have stopped her. It did stop her. Her arm was smoking, sizzling, the skin peeling back. But she didn't care. She grabbed Jane's wrist and pulled, and Jane slammed against the silver light, her face inches from Morwen's ancient, burning eyes. "You think this ends with a kiss?" Morwen hissed. "You think love conquers all? I loved him. I loved him and he turned me to ash. He will do the same to you." Jane's wrist was on fire, the vial was slipping, but she didn't let go. "Maybe," Jane said, her voice steady despite the pain. "But at least I tried. At least I didn't spend 1,000 years poisoning myself with hate." Morwen's eyes widened. Jane headbutted her. It was not a graceful move. It was not strategic. It was pure, desperate, Omega stubbornness. Her forehead connected with Morwen's nose, and the witch shrieked and released her grip, stumbling backward into the cage. Jane fell to the ground, the vial still in her hand, and 3 perfect drops of black blood inside it. "I got it," she gasped. Jessie was at her side in an instant, pulling her away from the cage, his hands running over her arms, her face checking for wounds. "You're insane. You're absolutely insane." "I learned from the best." Morwen was howling inside the cage, her body flickering between forms, old and young, beautiful and terrible, human and something else entirely. The silver light was dimming. The trap wouldn't hold much longer. "We need to perform the ritual now," Jane said. "Right here." Jessie looked at the vial, then at Morwen, then at Jane. "Flora said we need a vessel, something that represents our bond. We don't have anything." Jane's mind raced. The fire, the cave, the meadow, the garden, then she knew. She reached up and pulled a strand of hair from her head, brown and ordinary and soft. She held it out to Jessie. "Your turn," she said. Jessie stared at her. Then slowly he reached up and pulled a strand of his own hair, dark as midnight, coarse as battle. He held it next to hers, 2 hairs, one brown, one black, together. "It's not much," Jane said. "But it's us. We're the bond, not a gift, not a letter, us." Jessie's golden eyes glistened. "Jane, pour the blood," she said. He poured. The black blood from the vial mixed with the 2 hairs in Jane's palm, and the world stopped. For one heartbeat, one perfect, eternal heartbeat, there was nothing. No sound, no light, no curse. Just Jane and Jessie, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating as one. Then the magic exploded. Silver light and green fire and something else. Something gold, something warm, something that felt like dawn, burst from Jane's palm and shot into the sky. The dome around Morwen shattered. The witch screamed, her body convulsing, the curse tearing itself out of her like a living thing. But Jane barely noticed. Because Jessie was changing. The marble that had been creeping across his skin retreated, fatting from his hands, his arms, his chest, his face. The stiffness in his joints melted away. His golden eyes blazed brighter than ever, full of life and fire and something Jane had never seen there before, hope. The curse lifted from him like a veil being drawn back. And in its place, something new settled into his chest, something that felt like love. Morwen collapsed to the ground, her body shrinking, aging, the green fire dying in her eyes. She looked up at Jessie, not with hatred this time, but with something almost like peace. "It's done," she whispered. "I can't feel it anymore, the curse, the anger, it's gone." Jessie knelt beside her. "It was never about me, was it?" Morwen's cracked lips twitched. "No, it was about me, about what I became." She reached up with a trembling hand, and Jessie took it. "I'm sorry, Jessie, for all of it." "I know." Morwen's eyes closed. Her hand went limp. And then she was gone, not in fire or fury, but in silence. Her body crumbled to ash, and the wind carried her away. Jane stood in the center of the clearing, the silver light fatting, the fire burning low. She looked at her palm. The 2 hairs were gone. The blood was gone. All that remained was a small, golden scar, a circle, like a kiss, like a promise. Jessie rose and walked to her. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, really looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "It's over," Jane said. "It's just beginning," Jessie replied. He took her face in his hands and kissed her. Not like the garden, not like the cave. Like a man who had been frozen for 1,000 years and had finally found the sun. Jane kissed him back. And somewhere in the distance, in the pack house of Silvermoon, Theo looked up at the sky and smiled. Ivy, the real Ivy, confused and bruised but alive, asked him what he was looking at. "Future," Theo said. "It looks warm." Forbidden Garden was not forbidden anymore. Jane had made sure of that. She had torn down the archway herself, her small Omega hands prying stone from stone while Jessie watched with something like awe. The roses had turned from black to red to gold. The fountain flowed again, clear and cold and sweet, and the throne at the center, the throne where Jessie had sat for 1,000 years, was gone. In its place, a small wooden bench faced the sunset. Jane sat on that bench now, her feet tucked beneath her, a worn blanket around her shoulders. The pack had changed in the past month. Declan had stepped down as Alpha, citing his failure to protect his own. The new Alpha was Theo, gentle, kind Theo, who had somehow become the leader Silvermoon needed. And Jesse was no longer king. He had surrendered his crown on the first day of his freedom, standing before the assembled packs and declaring that empires built on blood and fear were not worth keeping. The wolves had been confused. Some had been angry. But when Jesse had knelt before Theo, knelt the Alpha King kneeling to an Omega-born tracker, the world had shifted. Now Jesse lived in a small cottage at the edge of the territory. He grew vegetables. He chopped wood. He learned how to be soft. And every night he came to the bench in the garden to find Jane. "Your hands are cold," he said, sitting beside her and taking her fingers in his. He kissed each one, slow and deliberate. "Warm enough for both of us," Jane said. Jesse smiled. It was not the cruel smile of the statue or the sharp smile of the king. It was a real smile, warm and tired and full of something that looked like peace. "I dreamed about you last night," he said. "Before I met you, 1,000 years ago. I dreamed about a girl with brown hair and a tattered shawl who kissed me in the dark and woke me up." Jane leaned her head on his shoulder. "That's not a dream, that's a memory." Jesse pressed a kiss to her hair. "That's a prophecy." They sat together as the sun set, the golden light washing over the garden, the fountain bubbling, the roses swaying in the breeze. The curse was gone. The witch was gone. The stone was dust. All that remained was them. And for two people who had spent their whole lives alone, that was more than enough. If you love this story, please like, subscribe, and share to your loved ones. Tell me where you are watching from, and also please rate the story in the comments.